The first Mars child is born healthy. The Habitat Medical Bay has everything it needs. The crew celebrates. Someone sends a message to Earth. 20 minutes of silence, then a burst of congratulations arise from the other side. The child is weighed, measured, given a clean bill of health. She is perfect by every available metric. No one asks if she will ever see Earth. The question does not arise that day because it does not feel urgent. She is an infant. Earth is a problem for later. But the developmental clock that will make that question unanswerable has already started. Every day she spends growing in 0.38 g is a day her skeleton is learning what gravity is and learning the wrong answer for the planet her parents came from. Mars doesn't just change the body, it changes the body before the person is old enough to know what they've lost. That sentence is not a prediction about extreme conditions. It is a description of how developmental biology works under any gravitational environment, applied to the specific gravitational environment of Mars. The mechanism is the same one that governs bone formation in every human child who has ever lived. The outcome is different only because Mars has never been the environment in which those children grew up. Human bone is not a fixed structure. It is a dynamic tissue that remodels continuously throughout life in response to mechanical load, the forces that gravity and movement apply to the skeleton every day. In childhood and adolescence, this remodeling process operates at its highest rate. The skeleton is not simply growing larger, it is calibrating its density, its cortical thickness, and its internal architecture to the loads it is actually experiencing. A child who grows up in Earth's gravity develops a skeleton that is built to carry a human body at 1 g, because that is what the mechanical loading signal told the bone-forming cells to produce every day for 2 decades. In 0.38 g, the mechanical loading signal is reduced to less than 40% of Earth's value. The bone-forming cells receive a different input. They produce a different output. The skeleton that results from 2 decades of development in Martian gravity is not a slightly weaker version of an Earth skeleton. It is a correctly calibrated skeleton for its environment, one that was never instructed at the cellular level to build the cortical thickness, trabecular density, or joint load tolerance that Earth's gravity requires. The child is not unhealthy by any Mars relative standard. She is precisely as healthy as her developmental environment produced. The same process applies to muscle development. Skeletal muscle fiber composition, the ratio of fiber types, the cross-sectional area, the tendon insertion strength, is shaped by the gravitational loads experienced during development. Muscle mass is maintained by the effort required to move a body against gravity. In 0.38 g, that effort is reduced. The musculature that develops to meet it is calibrated to it. A Mars-born adult is not undertrained. Their muscles are correctly sized for the loads they will actually encounter. The loads they will encounter on Earth are a different number, and the gap between the two does not close through exercise regimes applied to an adult body whose developmental program already ran to completion. The critical developmental window for skeletal density runs from birth through approximately the early 20s, with the most rapid and consequential phase occurring during adolescence, when peak bone mass is established. Peak bone mass is the highest density a skeleton ever achieves, and it is the baseline from which all subsequent adult bone loss is measured. The Mars-born individual reaches peak bone mass in 0.38 g, calibrated to 0.38 g. That peak is then fixed. The window closes. This is not a failure of medical intervention. It is how developmental biology works. Adult bone remodeling can increase density incrementally in response to increased load. This is why weight-bearing exercise preserves bone density in aging adults, and why physical therapy can partially recover density lost to disuse. Those processes operate at the margins of an existing structure. They work within a skeleton that was already built. They cannot rebuild the foundational architecture of a skeleton whose developmental program ran to completion under different conditions. The spine illustrates this with particular clarity. Vertebral bone density and the load-bearing geometry of the spinal column are set during the growth years in direct response to the compressive forces gravity applies along the body's vertical axis. In 0.38 g, that compressive force is less than half of its Earth value for every day of development. The vertebrae that form under those conditions are not simply smaller, they are structurally calibrated to a lower compression range. Earth's gravity does not ask them to work harder within a range they already support. It asks them to work outside that range entirely, in territory the developmental program never mapped. Place that skeleton in Earth's gravity, and the consequences are not gradual. The forces Earth applies to a body are not a signal the skeleton can slowly adapt to over months of physical therapy. They are a structural load applied immediately and continuously to a frame that was not built for them. Fracture risk in low-gravity developed bone exposed to 1G, loading is estimated to be significantly elevated, with spontaneous fractures possible under loads that would be routine for a person who grew up on Earth. Standing is a load. Walking is a load. Climbing a flight of stairs applies forces to the hip, knee, and ankle joints that a Mars-built skeleton has never been designed to absorb. The cardiovascular system compounds the problem in a different direction. The heart is a muscle, and like all muscles, it develops in response to the demands placed on it. On Earth, the cardiovascular system develops across childhood to pump blood against full gravity, to maintain adequate pressure in the lower body, to size the heart's chambers for the circulatory volume that 1G demands. In 0.38 g, those demands are reduced. The Mars-born heart is not a weak heart, it is a correctly sized heart for its gravitational environment. In Earth's gravity, that heart is asked to perform work it was never sized to sustain. The fracture risk and the cardiovascular strain arrive together in the same body from the same gravitational cause. The failure is not exotic, it is structural arithmetic. In 2019, NASA published its twin study comparing Scott Kelly, who spent approximately 1 year aboard the International Space Station, to his identical twin Mark Kelly, who remained on Earth. Bone density showed measurable changes that were among the slower markers to partially recover post-mission. Some markers had not fully returned to baseline by the end of the monitoring period. Scott Kelly was a fully developed adult with a complete Earth-built skeleton before his mission began. The changes produced by 1 year at zero gravity in an adult skeleton with that foundation behind it required months to partially reverse. The Mars-born child situation is the earlier step in the same process, and the earlier step is the one that cannot be undone. The twin study describes what happens when you remove gravitational load from a structure already built for it. The Mars-born adult's starting point is different, and the distance from that starting point to Earth tolerance is not a recovery distance. It is a developmental gap that no post-developmental medical program has the tools to close. There is a dimension to this that the engineering literature does not address, and the medical literature only approaches indirectly. A Mars-born child does not choose their developmental environment. The gravitational calibration of their skeleton, their musculature, their cardiovascular system, these are determined before they can walk, before they can speak, before they understand what is being permanently decided on their behalf. The adults who bring children into existence on Mars are making a biological choice for another person that cannot be undone. That person will grow up, will understand what was decided, and will live with a body shaped by a choice they never made. The ethical dimension of that fact has not been addressed in any major Mars colonization document, because addressing it honestly would require acknowledging the permanence of the biological outcome, which the same documents consistently frame as a manageable medical challenge rather than an irreversible developmental consequence. The proposed intervention is physical loading programs, exercise regimes, centrifuge exposure, resistive suits that apply additional mechanical load to Mars-born children during development to partially simulate Earth gravity's effect on the skeleton. This is the correct direction and an incomplete answer. Partial loading produces partial results.
The pediatric loading research required to calibrate such a program does not yet exist because no children have grown up in reduced gravity. The protocol would be designed and implemented on the first generation of Mars children simultaneously with being studied, which is not a medical research design that any ethical framework would endorse for a healthy population where the long-term consequences cannot be known in advance. Even a successful partial loading program does not solve the cardiovascular component. A loading suit addresses the skeleton. It does not replicate the cardiovascular developmental load of growing up under full gravity. The interventions available address the problem the engineering team identified. They do not address the full scope of what 2 decades in 0.38 g does to a developing human body. The honest answer that no Mars colonization roadmap has stated publicly is that the first generation of Mars-born children represents a permanent biological divergence, not a manageable health challenge, a divergence, a population that can never go home, not because Earth is unwelcoming, but because Earth is structurally incompatible with the bodies Mars will have built.
The multi-generational Mars colony, the dream that drives the emotional case for going, requires children. It requires families. It requires people who were born there and will live their entire lives there. That is what a colony means, as opposed to an outpost or a research station. And that vision, taken seriously, is the vision of a population that is permanently separated from Earth by biology rather than by distance. Distance can be crossed. 7 months of transit, a great deal of fuel, a manageable set of engineering problems. Biology cannot be crossed in the same way. The Mars child who grows to adulthood in 0.38 g is not 7 months away from Earth. She is a developmental history away from Earth. And developmental history cannot be reversed by any spacecraft or any medical program operating on an adult body that has already finished growing. This is the fact that the language of colonization consistently elides. Settlement, colony, new civilization, these terms carry the implication of a connection to origin. The biological reality of Mars-born children is that the connection to origin is severed not by politics or distance, but by the gravitational environment during the years when the body is deciding what it is. That decision is made without consent, before the person is old enough to understand what is being decided, and it is final. The first Mars child is born healthy. She grows up healthy by every Martian measure. She is in every sense that matters to her daily life perfectly suited to her world. Earth is the planet in photographs, the planet her parents talk about, the planet she has never felt under her feet and never will. Mars didn't take Earth from her. The physics of development did, quietly, completely, and before she was old enough to ask.